we are very fortunate to have guest artist Gwen Coyne, San Francisco photographer. And, you know, it's fascinating. Like, I have loved her work for probably from the beginning, from the first photo I ever saw of it, you know, like, and it always had these qualities to it. But, you know, rather than me say what I liked about it, you know, in preparation for her coming, you know, in one of the classes, we had the students go around and come up with words that they, you know, came to mind when they looked at Gwen's work. And, you know, as a teacher and just as a fellow artist, I wanted to pick their brains to see if they saw what I saw in her work, or if they didn't, or any of those things. And so I wanted to read some of these words that came to mind with her work. The first one was decisive moment. The next one was mysterious. The next one was introspective, personal, emotional, collaborative, telepathic. And then someone said, well, they seem to be written in code or something, like we have to figure them out. And I love that, you know, myself, because I thought what the students were getting from her work is kind of exactly what I was getting from it. And I felt like there was something I needed to figure out, and Gwen wasn't telling us everything. And I think that's what I loved about the work, you know, so much. And so, you know, there was also in her work just a visual splendor of the work. Like they worked in the way almost like an Ansel Adams photo worked. Like it had like the tones and the highs and the lows and the push and pull of all of these things. And so beyond seeming meaningful, it also just had, you know, like a visual splendor to it. And so all that together, of course, you know, I had to ask her to come and talk to us so I could use this as an excuse to figure out what this work is all about. So enough of that introduction from me. Let's welcome Gwen Coyne to our class here. Gwen, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you know, before you start, I would say that a lot of the students may have questions, and I would encourage you all to put your questions into the chat. And from there, we will be able to, I can feed them to Gwen, and then probably at the end, it might get a little looser and you can ask her these things yourself. But I'd encourage you to do, you know, to do that, put them in the chat. And so Gwen, why don't you begin?
All right, well, thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Timothy. I lead a creative strategy team in downtown Oakland. I live in Oakland, so close to San Francisco, but not quite. And I take a lot of pictures of my daughter, as Timothy mentioned. And I was actually really intrigued when Timothy invited me to speak to this class on this topic, because I'm not a professional photographer. And I think I've set up a professional lighting setup maybe once or twice in my life. And so, so what I can speak to today is how I use light and natural light in the pictures that I take with my daughter. So I'll start from the beginning. I think just in terms of background and in terms of getting into photography, my favorite toy as a kid was the Viewmaster. And so I searched it up a little bit before. I have a few tabs I'm going to toggle between. So the Viewmaster, I really believe that Instagram is the adult version of the Viewmaster, and I'm still addicted to it. I just always really have loved taking pictures of, you know, things, but it's mainly just looking at pictures as a kid. I loved viewing slideshows that my parents would put on the weekends. I love picture books. Just, you know, poring over pictures has always been something that's been really appealing to me. So growing up, I was also really interested in my dad's Polaroid that was sitting on the shelf, but I was never really allowed to use it because film was so expensive. And so I think I took maybe one shot on that. And it wasn't until I was about 10 or 11 that I got my first camera, and I looked it up as well. And I'm pretty sure this was it, because it reminds me of that camera that I had. I remember the little shifting, you know, cover for the lens and the flash box, and just the rectangular, you know, boxy shape. And so I remember taking this camera with me to the state fair with my mom. And I was so excited. I was taking pictures of all the animals, the cows and sheep and pigs. And I was thinking as I was taking these pictures that I was just going to have these amazing results. And I couldn't have been more excited to get the rolls of film developed and see what the pictures were. And so my mom took them to the pharmacy at the time and came home with the envelope, and I took out the prints and started leafing through them. And she said, I think a few turned out. And I was like, what? They should have all turned out. They're amazing, right? Because I had this vision of what I was going to get on this camera. And I was so disappointed because I looked at them and they were all, it was color film, and they were all gray and grainy, and they were dark. they didn't, you could hardly even see the animals. And I guess at that time I had no sort of understanding that you could control any of that with light. And so I was really disappointed, and I completely lost interest. And I don't think I even took any other pictures on that camera, or at least none that I remember. So I just put it down, forgot about it. And I think I didn't get sort of reintroduced to photography until I was in college. So I was an art major, and I emphasized in painting, and photography was actually the furthest thing from my mind at the time. I remember, I think I opted into every elective that I could before I took photography. I did painting, I did sculpture, I did printmaking, I did 3D modeling, graphics, and photography was the last thing on my list. And it didn't seem like they were my people, right? I'm very introverted. It was a very extroverted bunch, and I was thinking I'll stick with the painting crowd, but I enrolled in Ingeborg Gerdis's Intro to Black and White Photography class there at UCSC and over in Santa Cruz. And I was almost instantly hooked. I loved her. I loved everything about, the dark room. I love printing. I love reeling the film in the dark. I even met my husband in the dark room. So, I mean, everything about photography really clicked for me. And I remember going into her critiques, she would basically let all the students pin up their work on the wall, and the students would provide somewhat subjective feedback. It wasn't particularly objective, but it was really interesting. And then she would take her rounds in the classroom, and she would pause at my pictures and she would say, Gwen, they're a little on the dark side. And I didn't know what she meant. I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm printing, it's the printing quality, and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm printing too dark, or maybe it's my subject matter. But regardless of all that, that sort of stuck with me a little bit, but I just loved being in her class, and went on to take an alternative processes class with Susan Friedman that I also really loved after that. But those were the only two classes that I actually had time to take in college, because I had put it off to the very end, right? Because I just didn't think it was going to draw me in. So, so in talking about light, I think it's really important for me to start with, the dark side. And I wrote here that the focus on my daughter really started more as a form of self-therapy for me, to help sort of deal with my anxiety about her health. So she was a really sick kid growing up. She has asthma, and so she would suffer from bouts of bronchiolitis or pneumonia. She would have low oxygen saturation. She's been hospitalized, and so it was basically our normal as she was growing up. She, little colds would turn into major emergencies. So she, for instance, she would have her friends, and her friend would have a cold, and I would get instantly worried because a friend could be sick for 2 days and she could be sick for 2 weeks, and would be taking time off and, staying up late and counting her breaths and making sure we didn't need to take her in to the emergency room. So yeah, so I think this is, you know, when I really started taking pictures of her in earnest, because it was like, it was sort of a sense of control over something that was absolutely out of my control, right? And it was something that helped me sort of process the situation and you know, be close to her at the same time.
I mean, before she was born, did you photograph? What did you photograph?
I still took pictures of her. I wish I had actually included some of those pictures, because, you know, there's this little happy roly-poly color picture of a kid holding its feet, you know, on the rug, you know, just, you know, I took pictures as I've always taken pictures, but I wasn't, I wouldn't say that I was focused in on her in the same way. It was, you know, the celebration of her, but not in the same way and same level of intensity, maybe, as after she became ill. So these photos, they're obviously also very dark and grainy and underexposed. But it was, you know, it was in the hospital under fluorescent lights, you know, wheeling through these hospital corridors on the way to an ambulance to get her to the ER from the pediatrics ward. So yeah, so you know, through this process, you sort of recognize that good light is really there when you need it to be, and it's sort of like that on all sorts of levels. It's like luck, you know, you learn to work with whatever you have at the time, and you learn to you know that nothing is perfect. You don't have perfect circumstances.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll pause for a minute.
Yeah. So my question is, what did you photograph before she was born?
Oh, before she was born. Oh, I thought before she was ill. So before she was born, I would photograph all sorts of things. I think the things that I was most interested in were actually more street scenes. So I'd like to find places that aesthetically I would sort of appealed to my aesthetics, and then I would wait for something to happen. So it's like trying to find a background that was appealing and that could tell a story, and then I would wait for someone to enter the scene to sort of complete that story.
Right.
I would take all sorts of different pictures, like landscapes, people, but I gravitated, I think, more towards street photography.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think you had a voice by the time she was born, a photographic voice?
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I had been taking pictures for quite some time. So, I mean, 20 years or so. So yeah.
Yeah, you had that by then.
I had something. I don't know if it was a voice, but I had some background in it. So. Yeah. So yeah, so in this process, you sort of, when the great light comes, you know, and when it comes, you just know you need to respond to it and be grateful and seize it and work with it. And I think at this time I started really focusing in on her as the brightest spot and exposing for her and letting everything else go into the shadows, because she was my focus and she was my priority.
Yeah, yeah.
So trigger finger here. So so this all led into this series of photos that I dubbed the early years, because it was really a time that I could focus on the space in between her illness, right? So it was really, again, sort of celebrating her life and the more fantastical, you know, wonderful childhood moments in between being sick and those sort of terrifying, you know, episodes that she would get sick. So I would say that really opposite to my own childhood. My childhood was non-dramatic. It was very magical, you know, and no illness. I was the second child in my family. So my parents had pretty much lost interest, I think, in taking pictures of me. So I didn't have a lot of pictures of myself in my childhood. So I sort of had to make up my own presence.
Right.
And I think that really informs sort of the way that I work, is that it's the sort of memory, these vignettes and a nebulous state of childhood that you can't really put your finger on. And so I think that, really informed my work with her, sort of more of the toy camera effect, right? That you can't really, you're not documenting specifics, you're just leaving some room. Imagination.
Right. Right.
So I thought I would just go into some of the pictures and we can talk about it and ask questions. For this one, this slide, I think being a weekend photographer, that's what I sort of dub myself. I'm an occasional weekend photographer. I think it's really, you rarely have those great light circumstances when you're trying to get your family out of the house, in the morning, and you never out when the sun's coming up and you have the beautiful morning light. And by the time it's afternoon and you have those long shadows, everyone is hungry and they want to pack up and go home and drive back from wherever we've been. So really you're just working with whatever you've got during the day, and it's usually sort of bright, natural light, intense. So this one on the left, I don't know if a lot of you have kids or work with kids or take pictures of kids, but I sort of liken it to sports photography. It's either really, really fast paced, or it can actually be in slow motion and really predictable, and what's going to happen before it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that this, I'm not sure if that's blocking the view. So I would say in this case, it was actually the slow motion. So we had come home, she had just gotten out of the car. This light here is the reflection of the window from the car on the wall. Oh, wow. And oh. She stepped out of the car. Yeah, she stepped out of the car and she stepped into the light, and you can just see her, little kid, responding to this intense light. It's in her eyes. She's fumbling for her glasses, and she gets them and she's putting them on, and she has them upside down. She's just sort of struggling. And you could see all of this take place. You could see this, here's this amazing light reflection, which I was really honed into because it's sort of an unusual shape, occurring on the wall. And this little kid just in slow motion, she's responding to the light. And so I have my phone, which is what I take many of my pictures on, and just really wanted to respond to that scene and capture her as she was putting on the sunglasses.
Wow, I just thought it was some rainbow phenomena, or it was on the wall, painted on the wall, but then you get the light source. No, it has that weird bounced light. So I mean, do you direct her, or shooting kids, it's, I had photographed family, and it's like you get 2 seconds. You know what I mean? Like, do you tell her what to at least encourage her? Like, hey, can you stand over there? Or is that just out of the realm of anything you could do?
It really depends. So she hates posing for photographs. So she really resists that. So that generally doesn't happen. When she was a little kid, the phone was sort of more of an extension of my hand. It was always with me. And so she wasn't really aware of what I was doing with it. And everything when she was really little was really very candid, right? So she very rarely would just sit and pose for a picture. She would do it occasionally. Mm-hmm. But these two are candid. So maybe as I go through them, I can call out, if there's something where she posed for me, and just to help sort of give that sense of when it did happen and how it impacts the picture and why it feels different. Because I think it feels very different when she poses than when she's sort of in a candid state.
Mm-hmm. These are beautiful.
So this picture on the right, this is at Cesar Chavez State Park. So I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but usually there's a lot of people out flying kites and it's windy. There's people walking their dogs. But we got there on the day that it was very windy and cold, and there was absolutely no one in sight. And it was a really gray, sort of flat light, homogeneous looking sort of day and climate. And we parked our car and she got out and she's looking around and you could see, she was thinking, what are we going to do here? Really, she was not excited about being there. And so she stands there for a minute and then she says, Mama, let's play hide and seek. And I was looking around and Cesar Chavez is wide open. There's not a bush anywhere to hide behind, right? And I'm thinking, how amazing, this imagination of this little girl who sees this as an opportunity to play hide and seek. And so I said, okay, you count and I'll hide. And so again, this is one of those really predictable things, like you can start thinking about what the scene is as you're interacting. So she doesn't know that I was about to start taking pictures of her counting. But I knew I was going to take a picture of her counting because, she has these the white of her hands against the dark of her cap and this, empty field where she's wanting to play hide and seek. So that's sort of the story, maybe behind this one.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
So these are just different types of lighting conditions, right? I was a little bit of a helicopter mom, perhaps with a kid who had fragile health. She was a little hazard prone as well. She would get hurt a lot growing up and get into trouble. And so, I'm usually pretty close to her, or at least in this period of time, sort of hovering. And I see this, this delicate kid on the right, and the barbed wire and the sharp pokey plants, and my mom instinct is danger lurks everywhere. And I don't want her to reach out for that plant, but she's just exploring the world. And I love silhouettes and the backlight, and I was close enough to her that that worked really well with this picture.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, I mean, do you feel there was a period where you did where she looked like the iconic thing that you wanted her to be? You know what I mean? Or because there's times where there's a period, I think, when people photograph kids where they appear kind of iconic and just iconic. And then there's periods where suddenly they're themselves and they can be less metaphorical or something. Does that make any sense to you?
Absolutely. Yes. So I think it was in this period of time between when she was just a couple of years old to maybe 8, that felt like that to me, where it was, I think it was around 8, and it might have been a little earlier, where she started becoming very self-aware, aware of her surroundings and the camera and the fact that I was taking pictures. And I think things changed quite a bit in terms of just what sort of pictures I was taking of her.
No, that makes sense, totally. I think probably to anyone who's photographed family.
So this picture on the right is actually just at a birthday party, and it's this kid who has a hard time breathing, and she picks up a wand and blows these incredible bubbles that are reflecting the sunlight, very harsh light at the party. And I'm sure it was more of an attribute of the wand than it was of her lungs, but for me it was a very magical picture to have her being able to blow air into these bubbles and just enjoy breathing. So.
Yeah, interesting.
And here we had just gone to the zoo, San Francisco Zoo, to look at the animals. And pretty much she made a beeline to the playground and sort of started swinging on the bars and playing. And so we spent maybe a quarter of the time looking at the animals and the rest of the time in the playground. And here again, the one on the left was taken at a different time, obviously, from the one on the right. The one on the left was probably about midday, really bright sun, so casting shadows. These bars are very wavy, so it had a strange shape on the ground. It wasn't just a straight bar because it's a curve at the San Francisco Zoo.
Yeah.
And then the one on the right, I think that light was probably more homogeneous on that day, and she was at the same playground. She loved the zoo and going, usually going to the playground more than anything. So looking at the animals in the playground, not in the real ones. So this is a seal coming up if you can't really tell.
Oh, wow.
This one was actually on the Fuji. The one on the left and the one on the right is on the iPhone. So I thought that was interesting, just because I applied a similar effect that I do with my iPhone pictures to the Fuji, just because it felt out of place posting
Right.
really stylistically different photo.
So you use a lot of different mediums, like you use a phone, you use cameras, you use a variety of things.
Yeah, so I would say my phone goes with me everywhere. So it's easy sort of to default to, and I love mobile photography. I feel just it's just very convenient and very immediate and gratifying, and allows you to really share very quickly with all sorts of people around the world, right? And then I use a Fuji X-T30, and I like really wide angle lenses, so 10 to 24 millimeter lens is what I usually use on the Fuji.
Wow, that's very wide. What is the Fuji? Like, what is it? Like a DSLR type of thing?
Yeah, so you have you have interchangeable lenses, and you can fiddle with the controls. And I usually am setting whatever ISO and aperture I'd like to shoot at, and then the shutter is automatic on that. So.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I love these two. You know, we have a slew of questions. Let's look at the next slide, and while we're looking at that, I'll ask you. I'll begin these questions.
Okay, great.
Oh, this is an interesting pair for sure. So we have a bunch of questions here. Let me kind of dig in. You know, there's so many, you could probably just give knee-jerk reactions really to some, and then some probably might merit more discussion. How would you describe your style? And that's from an Angel student.
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't really thought about that. I would maybe describe my style as sort of minimalist. I like to try and focus on certain things. I don't want too many things happening. As I mentioned before, I studied painting, and I really like to have something that tells the story in the picture, but doesn't complete the story. And so I thought it was very interesting, the feedback you provided at the beginning. The untold story is really important to me in my photos, or the mystery. You know, what is happening here? What's going on? I don't like to solve the problem for folks who are looking at my pictures.
Right. No, all of that makes sense. From Ofer Tannenbaum, one of the students, he says, what does your daughter feel or think about the photos and the fact that she's a huge subject in your work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I was asking her that the other day. Just sort of thinking about this conversation and wondering, what she thinks of all this. And she said, I said, so what do you think of my pictures? And she said, they're pretty boring. So,
That's awesome.
very
That's
so
awesome.
honest, right? And I said, do you mind that I have all these pictures up and that, there's all these people coming and looking at these pictures on the site? And she said, no, I don't really care. Would probably be more interesting if you did video. so
She wants you to pivot to video.
And I said, you want me to take videos of you? She said, no. So yeah, she seems not very connected to them. And so maybe later in life, they'll mean something different to her.
Right.
But yeah, she's not particularly connected to it.
That's kind of the answer I thought you would give. You know what I mean? Because I don't think kids ever care anything about their parents' lives or passions or anything. You know what I mean? Like they do not care.
Yep.
From Sabbath, one of the students, he goes, "What made you take street scene photography?" And I guess in looking at your website, there are some things where it looks like you're almost a street photographer.
What makes me take it, I think it's just I'm curious, and I like watching people. I'm a little shy with street photography because I have that sense of stealing someone's soul. I don't want someone to be angry if I'm taking pictures of them. So I try to be a little bit on the sidelines. But I like just putting scenes together. I think I would really love directing films because I like waiting for things to happen and trying to sort of predict the future and see what things will take place in certain circumstances. So
Yeah.
And how colors and shapes come together. So.
Right. Interesting. So it's like a theater in which you can kind of compose and stand in the right place to make your little story. That's the way I'm interpreting what you're saying.
Absolutely.
This is just a question from me. What photographers do you feel influence you, either early on or now, or with this project? And if it wasn't photographers, it could just be artists in general.
Yeah, so many. It's probably an easier question to answer. Who doesn't inspire me, right? Because there's not only all of the classics and Magnum photographers or Kudelka. Kudelka was someone who hugely influenced me, and Diane Arbus and Sally Mann and sort of all of the greats. And then there's all of the amazing National Geographic photographers. I remember I always had National Geographic around the house growing up, and so that's always been inspiring to me. Paul Nicklin is one that I really love looking at his work. But as far as just news photographers and photojournalists, and there's a woman named Rachel Bolchiowski. I'm probably mispronouncing her name. She's taking a lot of journalistic photos. And I just find inspiration through all of the collectives on Instagram that I'm part of those communities.
Yeah.
There's so many things, and then painting, it's like Chagall and Soutine, and so there are just endless numbers of folks that I'm inspired by. But I think that I think probably, and I actually have this tab here, so I'm glad you asked. I'm going to toggle over. So I don't know if any of you have heard of this guy, but it was The Mysteries of Harris Burdick. I remember getting this book when I was little. I was at a bookstore and I had entered a poetry contest. I was probably the only kid who entered this contest, and I won the contest, and they gave me this book. And I found this book to be just intriguing. The pictures are all in black and white, and they're sort of like, let me see if this comes up. You can see this little bird coming off the side of the wallpaper.
Yeah.
Just these very sort of strange scenes that are mysteries, right? And so I remember just loving this book as a little kid and leafing through it. And I think that really actually inspired me a lot more than you might think, alongside of all the influences outside of that.
Oh, that's fascinating. You know, it is like there is a small, like I have influences such as that, that were books that had a very kind of unusual darkness to them as a kid, that were aimed at kids, that like really did stick to me. And I remember asking my mom, like, why did you get those things? They were kind of creepy. And her thinking, oh, they were just hysterical or something. Where nowadays, I don't know if they would fly, you know, but it is interesting that, yeah, I think that in an earlier era, there was these, well, no, we probably still have, I don't know, are there parallels now? Like, are there surreal books put out for kids that you think are influencing a future generation of dark artists, you know?
I don't know. And it's funny because I never really considered my work dark. It was always the external, you know, coming in that would say that these pictures are, obviously the pictures of my daughter when she was sick are dark, but I always found them sort of, they're the bright spot, right? They're what I'm focused in. And I remember people would say when they saw my pictures that, well, Gwen, they're sort of creepy. And I'm like, why are they creepy? You know, just because they're black and white, or what is it? I want to understand that. What's the creepiness? So I don't know if it was influenced from these books where they're a little weird or surreal, but I never really sort of viewed my own work as creepy or dark, right? It just was in black and white primarily.
You know what I think it is? No, it's hard to define these things too. But, and I was thinking of it and preparing for your visit here, and I was thinking, well, she seems like she seems like a little girl in a fairy tale who would be like, I mean, fairy tales have darkness to them. Like Hansel and Gretel are lost in the woods and they're trying to find their way out. And I mean, if I'm remembering that one correctly, you know, and little kids lost in the woods, that's utterly terrifying, you know.
Yeah, oh, that's true.
And so I mean, to me, I think it's almost like they're scary in a kind of way a fairy tale is, or like an allegorical story is, or something like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
We have more questions, but let's get back. I'll let you speak. I'll let you speak. The one with the cat, I don't think I had seen that image. That's beautiful.
So this is Saba. This was our kitty. She ran away actually last year, so we haven't seen her for a year. We wish her well. We hope that she just relocated to another home. But we loved her very much. But this is a picture. My daughter is about to go up to ballet class. She took ballet for a little bit when she was younger, and she had just thrown this ballet magazine onto the ground. And this sort of piqued the cat's interest, going back and forth, looking at the ballet magazine and my daughter, and she started fiddling with the pages. My daughter's wearing these light tights, you know, ballet tights. And so it's just light coming in from the window here, illuminating this scene. And so again, I mean, you might be seeing sort of a theme in the way that I use light. It's less maybe about light and more about contrast between light and dark elements, right? In the scene, and what's white and what's black. And it's really easy to identify that as you're taking pictures. So really this, her legs being sort of the focal point, and then sort of circling around to the magazine and the cat and looking up and back down. So that's why I just love the interaction between her and the cat. There was this sort of camaraderie they had, and they would do things similarly together. You know, they would stare out the window, or they would, just the way their mannerisms were so similar and linked, that I often wanted to take pictures of them doing similar things, just because they were so like connected at the hip.
Oh, yeah.
So, and this one on the right is really just, you know, either going out on errands or coming back from a road trip. And I don't really actually recall when it was, but again, you know, everything is in the shadows except for the white wall behind. That's the same wall that had the reflection of the car window. I love that wall across the street from our house. It's a wonderful backdrop. But yeah, just light coming in from behind her. And this is when I'm not sure how old she is here, but this is about when she became aware of me with phone, constantly taking pictures, and you see the little bit of a side eye saying, mom's taking pictures again from the other side of the car.
Yeah.
So that expression, but she doesn't wait for me. She doesn't pose. And often once she sees the camera out, she'll make a face, or she'll put her hair in front of her face, or she'll do something to deter a picture. So she'll give me her message, either I don't want to be photographed, or, oh, it's fine, I'm in a more collaborative mood, and it's fine, or it can go either way. Sometimes she's curious and she just wants to learn what I'm doing and how I'm using the phone, and she'll take it over and start taking pictures herself. So.
Oh, so she doesn't hate this.
Oh no, but she does hate posing. So she doesn't mind the interaction, and she's curious about it, but she does not want to be asked to pose. It's like it's the inconvenience factor. As long as she's not inconvenienced by it, I can do what I want, and it's okay.
Right. That makes sense.
So here, let's see. So here's a picture. These pictures are actually when I did have wonderful light circumstances, and they were just, I think the one on the left was the day after it rained. And so it's that beautiful light when sun is coming out from behind the clouds, it's sort of sporadically, and you never really know when it's going to illuminate a scene, to your advantage. But it was just a beautiful day in general. We were at Salt Point State Park. It's over up by Sea Ranch area, Jenner, that area, Timber Cove. And she was just exploring the tide pools and looking into the water reflections. So these are the sorts of times, like, she doesn't mind if I'm taking pictures while she's just sort of exploring. So this isn't something where it's posed, it's just her interacting with nature.
Right. These are a beautiful pair here. And then, so it makes me want to bring up one of these questions that someone, Anna Rose Monroe, has posted here. She goes, how do you choose the pairing of your images? Do you pair them like they're in a book, or do you pair them as if they were a wall display, or is this paired just for this presentation?
So I just paired this for this presentation. I put them together mainly to talk about the different light circumstances. Aesthetically, some will work together and some won't. Some I actually paired intentionally to show sort of an opposite effect. This wasn't one of them. This was more reflective, right? It's the reflection in the window, the reflection in the pond, so or the tide pool. So it really depends. I don't follow a lot of like rules for myself. I let myself be free with my photography. It's not a profession for me, so I have fun with it, and I don't set limits for myself, and I do what I want to do. And so when I pair it, it's really more sort of a gut response, I would say, more than anything, as opposed to necessarily having it have to balance, if that makes sense.
Right. The let me pose another question here, because we have so many good ones here. From Alana Colville, she goes, are you looking out for scenes ahead of time that you think would work well as a photo, or do you just choose more spontaneous moments and places to capture? And I thought that myself with this, at least the image on the left, I was almost like wondering, well, I wonder if she knows she's going to this epic place and that there will be an amazing photo there, or is it just you're shooting all the time and there's no plan really?
A little both, but I would say that I definitely, when I get into an environment that I'm responding to aesthetically, I definitely start thinking about, okay, what are the pictures I can take, and where are the best places to take those pictures. And it's actually a really pertinent question for this slide, because the one on the right, we had gone to lunch. It was somewhere in Half Moon Bay, at a restaurant in Half Moon Bay. And my husband and my daughter had already been seated inside. And I think I went out to the car to get a jacket or something. And I came back and I saw this window with the curtain parted and the reflection and the light. And I was thinking, what a beautiful scene. And this is just missing something. And I took a picture of this scene without her in it. And I was sort of frustrated and angsty because it's like, here's this nice, perfect, location and scene, but there's no real picture here. And so I noticed that inside they were seated on the other side of the window. So I just knocked on the window to get her attention, and she turned around and looked out. So I was ready. And so this is sort of the planned aspect is, there are certain times when I try and lure her in or bring her in to the picture. As she may be a little bit unaware that, I'm scheming over there on the other side of the window. But it helps sort of a more natural picture to result.
Yeah. No, that was a good one to kind of bring up here. Here's a question that's kind of out of the blue, so I'll just ask it. This is from Ramon Cruz. He says, in your opinion, where do you think photography is going in digital times? And then he also says, by the way, I love your work. Where do you think photography is going in digital times? I guess we're assuming all of these are digital photos.
They are. I don't think I have any film photos here. So in digital times, so what I've noticed or observed, so my intention when I went to college with an art major was to become an artist, right? And I have a career that's related to art, but it's not art per se. It's not being a practicing artist. And I think what's happening with art, or at least with photography, is obviously everyone can do it, right? It's accessible at a level that it just wasn't before. I mean, you had to be very specialized. You had to have a lot of technical skill to get into photography, and now it's relatively easy. There's tutorials, that it's easy to take a picture, and so I think of it as it's much less of for many, it's much less of an art form than it is just a means of communication. And so that's where I feel it's going, and that's where I would probably want to take it with my own work is, getting into it in more of a journalistic way and being able to communicate. And that's why I'm really drawn, I think, to Instagram and these social platforms is basically because it's like windows onto people's worlds, right? People you don't know and perspectives you've not been exposed to. And so it feels like it's just sort of evolving us faster, right? Because we have all of this exposure to all of this amazing information and people's experiences that we didn't before, or at least not so easily. So.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with everything you said there.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was a big picture question. Just let me tap into some of these other questions before we lose sight of them. Oh, here's Raul V, one of my students, says essentially, how old is your daughter now? And on the early years images, she doesn't smile a lot. How does she feel about these photographs? And I think you answered how she feels about these photographs, but it was interesting the student focused on she doesn't smile a lot. Do you have thoughts on that?
She smells a lot, actually. I think I think it's more of my curation than it is her, right? So she's a pretty happy kid. I could see that that might not come across really in my work that I post, but she smiles a lot. She's very energetic. I think it's probably sort of connecting back to me again, that sense of, it's tenuous, and it's there's a sense of maybe still a little bit of anxiety, for me, and I hone in on the pictures where she's not smiling as much, but I haven't really I haven't really thought about why I gravitate to those photos more than the smiling ones, but I definitely have some where she's smiling as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, very fair. So then a couple kind of here's
I'm sorry, I didn't answer the first question. She's 10 years old. She's about to turn 11 next month.
oh, very cool. The from two different students, and I'll read these as just a little series. From Laisha Barosa, she says, in this series, like as we view it on the website, there's only one photo in color. Why is that? And then keep that in mind. And then Anna Rose Monroe asked, why the choice of black and white imagery? What do you think that choice of predominantly black and white imagery brings to your work, or the project itself?
Yeah, so what was the color picture in the series on my website? Now I'm curious. I actually don't recall.
Oh yeah, there is just one.
That's odd.
Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. And if any of the students are on her website and want to bring that up, feel free. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no. Well, so while I'm trying to recollect what that one picture is, I'll answer that. Because what I had with me, I'm not a gear sort of person. I'm pretty tiny. I don't like hefting around a lot of equipment. So usually it's with my phone. And when I first started taking pictures, the quality of color on a phone was quite bad. And it sort of accentuated some sort of the low quality aspects of the color. And so I would pretty much shoot everything on this hipstamatic application on my phone, because it was much more, it just worked better with the equipment that I was using at the time. It also sort of removed all of the unnecessary elements from the picture for me, and really focused in on my subject, my daughter, and the contrast between light and dark. But I love color. I find it actually a lot harder to work with. I only had classes in black and white photography. And so I used to shoot everything just in black and white. And then probably around the time that she was born, I made sure that I started shooting everything in color and then converting to black and white, so that I would have both, just in case at some point in the future she would say, why don't you have any color photographs of me? Which she did. Yeah. And I said, it's okay, I've got them. They're all on the drive. So if you ever want to go back and look at the color versions, we can.
Interesting.
Did I answer all the questions? I might have.
You know, I think so. It's funny. I went back to look at the early years and I did not see a color photograph now. So it could have been, but I had thought that too. But that could be a confusion. But Laisha, if you can find the color photograph that's confusing you, speak up and you can share your screen and we can figure out where it appeared. But yeah, I was under that assumption too, that like there was one that was that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm curious. I'm wondering if it's just one that I felt turned out better on the phone than the other one. So
no, I think it might be on your Instagram account. I think there's a picture of the dragon, the Puff the Magic Dragon at the altar. Oh yeah. And that was color, I think. Oh
yeah, no, I put in a rare color photo every once in a while, just when I am in a place that the color appeals to me. So that one has nothing to do with this series of her childhood. It was just something that I stumbled across Albany Bowl, but never been there before. I live so close to it, and it's just the sort of unique, sort of eccentric park, and it just has these beautiful sculptures, and so it's not really related to anything. And that's sort of what I mean by I tend to be a little bit free. I try not to limit myself to just any one thing.
Yeah.
And if I want to take a picture of a dragon sculpture when I'm taking a hike, then I will. So it's really interesting to see like how people respond to pictures on Instagram, though, because I think the algorithm really supports making sure you're you have some continuity in your style. And so if you throw something in that's totally unrelated, it's really interesting to see the reactions to it.
That's interesting. Laisha, can you share the image that you're, just Laisha sent us a message. She's saying, I found it.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second.
Laisha, it's all you. Oh, look at that.
Oh yes, got it. Yeah, so that was at her ballet class actually. And it was, I think the reason I kept it in color was just because the palette of that studio was really appealing to me. I also have a color picture of her in this deck that I'm sharing today that was not on the iPhone. That was at that same studio, just because the light coming in and the colors in the palette were just lovely. Yeah. Now I can see all the messages when I'm not sharing all these comments coming up. How nice. So in any case, I think I didn't make it black and white just because I love the reds and the greens. I was also so happy that she wore a dress. She will never wear dresses. So I think I was responding to the colors in the dress as well.
Yeah, sometimes a photo just is color. No, that is true. The oh, okay, thank you, Leisha. You did find it. That was brilliant. And we all were doubters there. So you can go back, Gwen, to your presentation.
Thank you, Alicia. All right, let's see.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. So yeah, so the one on the left is at the Exploratorium in San Francisco. You're probably very familiar with that location. It's an installation by Fujiko Nakaya called Fog Bridge. And I never actually knew about it going to the Exploratorium until one time when we were there, and I just happened to see it out of the corner of my eye. And then after that time, and it's very ephemeral, it stops pretty quickly. So if you're not there when it starts, you really catch the tail end. And it's, it's very fleeting. So after that, I made sure that I knew when it would happen, because I really wanted to be at the Exploratorium at a time when the fog was over the bridge. So we went to the Exploratorium many, many times when she was growing up. She loved going there. And the fog bridge is usually, again, it's usually teeming with kids. It's slippery. Kids are running just frenetically across the bridge, and it's hard to see when you're in the fog. And so it's actually it's one of these danger alerts everywhere sort of places where, like, I'm afraid she's going to get completely obliterated down the bridge when she's running, but there was no one there again this time, maybe on the opposite side. And it was one of those really unique light circumstances where it was a rainy day and then the sun would come out from behind the clouds and illuminate the fog. And so this is before she actually steps into the light. She's still in the shadow. So it helps provide that contrast as she's running into the fog.
Oh, absolutely. Here's a question for you that came up like when we showed your work in class, and it was in this class, Quality of Light. We discuss like what backlighting does, and then it is a little more of a technical class about being sensitive to the light, but lighting things. One of the students
take that class, Timothy.
Well, one of the students said, well, it's almost like her work like wouldn't even exist without her awareness of the light. You know what I mean? Like, meaning that like one of the tools you use so strongly, whether it's just instinctual or not, is this awareness of what this light is going to look like and what it means, really, or what it triggers in someone. Is that anything you'd want to elaborate on?
Well, absolutely. So it's like the state fair animals, right? If there's no light, it's really hard to draw a picture out of that. So you really have to find the light and sort of draw out the good qualities when you have it. So and I do use it. I do use it very intentionally in my pictures. And I think the one on the right And sort of an example of that, we were at, I think it was Alto Vista Chapel. It's a tourist attraction in Aruba. And my daughter does not like to be toted around to look at museums or attractions. She's just not into it at all. And so while my husband went and she said, I'm tired, I want to take a nap, I don't want to go look. And I said, okay, I'll stay with you in the car. And this is coming in from the side window, and she just sort of curls up in the back, and it's almost like she's putting her feet on the ledge of the light. I mean, that's just the back of the seat. So there's nothing that she can rest her feet on there. And it's not a very comfortable position to sleep in, right? So it's such a weird, surreal scene that, you know, she's putting her feet on the shadow right at the right place. And she's wearing these little bunny pants, you know, so I mean, that if you look in closely, like there's these little black and white prints of bunnies. So it's just one of those strange pictures, but the light, without the light, obviously, you know, there's really nothing there. It's very special. So
yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, is this a skill that you feel you always had? You know what I mean? Like,
I have no idea. Like I said, I've been taking pictures for a long time now. And so it's really hard to remember what things I would be attracted to taking pictures of when I started. And I don't think it was like this. I don't think there was so much contrast. I think it was much more, I think it was different. I think it's just evolved over time.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. Those are great.
So the one on the left is actually where, because I think you asked previously, do you ever ask her or, you know, suggest that she gets into a pose? And so this was just this year. So we're walking a lot because that's really, you know, what we can do in the pandemic, right? And so we take a lot of these pandemic walks around the neighborhood, and she's not a big fan of those. She's very much homebody. She loves to be at home. She loves gaming. She loves being in front of a computer screen. She really doesn't like to go out and about so much on day trips. She loves to be at home. But you know, I take her on the daily walk, and we were going up the hill, and I actually saw these two plants, and the light was coming from behind the trees, and I just thought it was aesthetically a nice composition. She wasn't in it, and I took a picture of the two plants, and again, it just feels like it's lacking something. But as I was taking a picture of the plants, I saw this arc with the light and the reflection of the probably bad lens on the iPhone. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And so I was trying to tilt it to get it to come back because it sort of is fleeting. You know, if you don't have it at the right angle, you don't get that light. Yeah. And so I got it back because I like the cat eye shape. And I said, hey, can you step into this picture just between the plants for just a second? And so she sort of begrudgingly said, okay. And she started, usually she'll say no. So I was I was actually very impressed that she moved into the scene, and she stood there for it. And this is actually, even though it looks like it would be sort of a slow motion picture, this is actually sports photography, right, for me, because she was there for probably all of a second before she's like, okay, done. If you haven't gotten it, you know, that's your problem. So yeah, so that it doesn't look like sports photography, but this is how I sort of see it. And then the one on the right was just after school. I was coming to collect her, pick her up, and she was playing hide and seek. That's one of her favorite games of childhood. If you observed that theme throughout the pictures. And her friend is this hand in the game cabinet over here. I don't know what these little things are. I guess they put them together to form balls, but I'm not a sports person, so not quite sure what they're used for. And then this is my daughter's foot. And my daughter has discovered her friend who was hiding in the cabinet and who had pulled this little half of a ball to keep the door from swinging open in her hiding space. So that's all there is, the story behind that.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful.
So yeah, we take a lot of road trips, day trips. She's also not a huge fan of being in the car, so we try to take local trips that aren't too far away. She often sleeps when we're driving. And so these are on two separate occasions. One, this is coming back over the Golden Gate Bridge, and this is coming back from, I think it was around Fort Ross, but also that sort of Salt Point State Park area,
right.
Different times. And this time she was actually she had been very ill on this trip. She wasn't ill when we went, but she got sick on the trip. And this side, she was very healthy. But I sort of had them, per the earlier question, more of a contrast in terms of the pairing, because it was one scene lighter and one scene darker, but the lighter one was actually when she was sick, and the darker one was when she was well.
Right, right. Another example where the light is everything, really, in defining these shots, you know. No.
And that's what I was responding to really in these pictures as we're driving. You know, I am entertaining myself in the back seat. She's sleeping. I can't read in the car, and the light comes in, and it's quite nice.
Yeah, yeah. The a kind of technical question posed by student David Corey. He says, "Do you use any external lenses on your iPhone?"
I don't. I would love to play around with that. I think I started looking into them at one point, but I'm very, I would say I'm not fussy with equipment. I try and minimize how much equipment I have, because I find I get really distracted or something goes wrong with it, and it makes me sort of agitated. So I don't usually toggle things as I am going out and about. But when you say an external lens with the iPhone, the one lens that I have played with a lot that I loved when I was shooting on the Nikon was the Lens Baby. I loved that because it was very instant, and you can, sort of squish it around. It was the older ones where they were like an accordion.
Yeah.
And you could play around with the focus, and so I use that quite a bit. Sort of the toy lenses really appeal to me, and I used a Holga for many years when I was doing film that I really enjoyed.
Are you surprised that they have not come out with a Holga app for a phone that looks exactly like the Holga?
I am a little, but I also feel like the Hipstamatic was that for me, and that was actually when I switched from film to digital, was when I discovered this Hipstamatic app on my phone, because it really recalled that sense of the toy camera and the vignette, and you could toggle between filters and play around and try and achieve an effect that was a little bit poor quality, sort of like the Holga, right?
Right.
You could even fiddle around with multiple exposures, and I like doing that on the Holga, taking a scene and then thinking what scene I could overlay. But then it just was easier on the phone and less costly. Developing film.
No, for sure. I think the Hipstamatic app did serve that for a lot of people, Yeah, I'm just surprised it hasn't been duplicated exactly in this age. People are like duplicating things,
Yeah. Patent it, Timothy. So make sure you get a patent on it. So that
there was a couple other questions here I thought I would intersperse here. Because they're kind of big picture things. And Anna Rose Monroe says, and I'm going to group these with some other questions here. Anna Rose says, in what ways do you see yourself in your daughter? And do you create specifically from that perspective? And with that in mind, Angel has asked, how has photography influenced you as a person?
I'll have to think about this. So
Yeah.
in what ways do it I see myself in my daughter? So um, I I think the things that I notice the most is she is very she lacks self-confidence, and she is very she's very talented. I mean, she's able to do a lot of different things, but she doesn't have any confidence in herself, and I see that a lot with the way things play out in her school, and um, with activities and things that she engages in, is that she's a little bit afraid to sort of just go for it. And so I see that, and I think she's also a little bit she's a little bit anxious. And I'm very anxious sort of personality. I actually wanted to say at the beginning of this presentation, I'm sort of a slow to warm up person. So at the beginning of this presentation, I was thinking about the time in high school, the first public speaking engagement that I had. I had been selected as a semifinalist in a NASA space science competition where I was devising a proposal for an experiment to be carried out in space. And I had been working on it for 6 months to a year. And I knew it cold. I had everything sort of at my fingertips in terms of what I wanted to say. And I was going to get flown out to present in front of a panel of NASA scientists. But before that happened, my science teacher told me that I needed to present in front of the graduating class, high school class. So it was 400 people, and I had never done any public speaking. And I got up in front of the class and I could not remember my name, and I couldn't remember the name of the paper. It was one of those, really formative experiences where you're up there and you're like, I know this stuff, but I cannot get it out. So I think that's that. I sort of see that in her, but I also see the curiosity and the sort of really just wanting to understand things at a really sort of maybe not such a superficial level, wanting to understand things a little more deeply. I really think that's a wonderful quality for her.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So then the deeper one, how has photography changed you?
It's changed me, I think, because it's really expanded my worldview and sort of helped keep things in perspective for me, because you think that your life is a certain way in respect to others, like you think it's hard, or you think whatever it is, and then you start seeing what's happening everywhere in the world, and you start seeing the experiences of others, and it's really sort of humbling, and it makes you grateful and makes you aware of how relative everything is. So I think that would be probably the way it's impacted me most. It also helps me sort of meditate. So it's sort of a therapy for me. When I was first studying art, I was actually thinking of going into art therapy as a career. And so I use it sort of as it's healing for me. It allows me to focus on me outside of work, and just to observe what's happening around me.
Yeah. No, excellent answer. So, here's something that struck me is I was always excited about the fact that, you're very clear that you do something else for a living, and photography inhabits this other space in your life. And, then here we're looking at a project that has gone on since the day this kid was born, really. Like, is it a decade, like, is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, it's funny, as working with students here, there is this idea that, if a student can work on a project for, say, 2 years, well, then they can create like an inner vocabulary within the project, because there's no denying what time can bring to a project. It can allow you to truly understand things about what you want to say with the project. And the one thing that struck me was, in looking at your work, over the span of however many years you've been doing it, I think I always was like, oh, well, you know, she didn't view it the way, say, a commercial photographer would, which is like, oh, okay, well, I did this, now it's done. You know what I mean? Or I did it for a client and it's done. You know, it was woven into your life, you know, and I think it did allow the thing to like have that depth to it and that richness to it. And so beyond that, I'm wondering if you could reflect on, like, if you worked as a photographer, which is something a lot of the students here think they're going to do, how do you think that would change your relationship to photography?
I think it's actually why I'm not working as a photographer, is because I think it would turn it into something for me, that would be very different, right? So it would be sort of, well, I'll maybe compare it to when I started out in graphic design. So I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a painter. I recognized that that was sort of a long shot and would be really hard to make a living doing in this time. but um, but I went into graphic design, and as a designer, I found it very stressful, right? You always had to just be creative on demand. And that was really unappealing to me, because for me, it was like the opposite effect. Some people can really do their best work, I think, when they're under pressure. And I am not like that. I actually need to be bored. I need to be sort of in a space where I'm not being bombarded with all sorts of things in order to feel like I can be creative. And so that career was actually really challenging for me, to try and be an artist, as you know, as the way I made my income. And so I think it maybe not, but I think it might be similar with photography, is that what I consider fun now and relaxing or meditative or whatever, therapeutic even, I'm not sure that I would, in a career. But maybe that's also just as you're getting into it and you're getting your head around it, and starting to feel comfortable in your own skin. Maybe that's a natural progression. But I never made it there, I would say, with graphic design, where I just wanted to be a designer because it just felt too intense in terms of that pressure.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope that makes sense.
No, no, it does. I mean, I'm thinking of one of my sons took martial arts classes once from someone in Albany who's this really great kind of deep philosophical martial arts teacher. And I remember saying to him once, "Oh, how come we're just meeting outside? Like, how come you don't have a studio or something?" And he was like, "I did that, but it made martial arts a business for me. And I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to just be like spiritual." And so I'm just, you know, I come to the park and I teach people, and then that's how I do it. I don't want to tie a business to it. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, you know, and I wondered if artists kind of view the relationships to photography in similar ways as well, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So okay, we can continue.
Okay. All right.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I can skip through as many or as few of these as the
No,
class has time for. So just to keep me paced, Timothy.
we're doing good. We're doing good.
All right. So this was, the one on the left was at Kunsthaus in Zurich. So as I think I mentioned, she does not like going to museums. So this is actually one of the things. It's sort of in response to the earlier question of how she's like me. Well, this is how she's really unlike me. She hates art. She hates art museums. She finds them very boring. She actually boycotted her art classes in distance learning this year, without my awareness until for about the first half of the year. The art teacher reached out and said, you know, we're putting together a little school magazine of the art that the kids have done. Can you take some pictures and send it to us? And I was thinking, I don't remember seeing any art.
Right.
And so we had a little conversation, and it turned out that she had basically boycotted the class and she hadn't shown up. And none of the teachers had mentioned this to me, that she was truant. So so yeah, she really doesn't like art. But when we go into the art museums, it's like she gets instantly tired. And actually this is, it's the boredom, right? It's not the lack of interest, but she will gravitate to any of the benches and she'll just take over the bench and she'll just lie there. So this is a pretty standard thing when we go out and about, which we do a lot. Both of her parents are art-minded and enjoy art. So it's always a mystery to us. But in any case, so yeah, and it also reminds me of when she's sick though. So I mean, this picture sort of reminds me also of, when she would just curl up and she wouldn't want to go anywhere or move because she was actually fatigued. So it gives me that sense of maybe she really is, tired, and maybe she's worn out and I shouldn't push her and she might be sick. So all of those things were sort of going on in my mind probably when I was taking this picture. And then on the right side, this is at Oregon Dunes, and I don't think I've ever seen her so alive as at the dunes. It was just such a joy to see her once she was unleashed at the top of the dune. It was hard to get up to the top. It was a fairly warm day. It was really sunny, but then there were these sandstorms there, just incredible sandstorms. So the sand was lashing your face and in your eyes, and it would go in sort of spurts. And so we were up at the top and we were running around in these dunes, and then the sandstorms would hit and she would be dancing and moving around, but then she would cover her face. It was actually really painful to take these pictures because it was getting in my eyes and hitting my face. But it was just so much fun. We had such a wonderful day running around the dunes, and there was a lake at the base of the dunes. We didn't go there because there were people there, and this was during the pandemic. So we try and go to places where they're remote and fewer people.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
And maybe this is also, let me just bring this up. Yeah, so this is also maybe an example of how she's not like me. So the one on the left, there's this house with 2 front doors in San Francisco. I think this is it's the area over by De Young Museum. So it was a museum trip. We were on the way to the museum, and there's these 2 perfectly viable options, two paths up to the doors. And this isn't someplace we were going. This isn't a friend's house. But what does she select? She selects this path in between, right? That's not okay. She just goes for, this path that, and she doesn't set any rules for herself. And so I took one picture. This is, again, the sports photography where I'm like, okay, you need to come down. We're not going to climb up someone's, divider between the paths. But I love that in her personality is that she chooses the unbeaten path, and she doesn't need to follow the rules. And in a way that can be a really good thing depending on the circumstances, but in a way it worries me a little as a mom. So
it's funny. Anna Rose Monroe, one of the students, just posted. She said, "Gwen, you have a wonderful eye for pairing images." Yeah, these pairs are fascinating that you've put together for this.
Thank you.
Are you planning anything for these? Like, it would make a killer book. Would be the obvious thing. But I mean, do you have plans for the project?
Yes, I would love to make a book of the series. I think it'll be really hard to do because I have so many pictures of her, and so it's hard to know. Every time I sort of look back, I choose a different set of pictures, and so I think it's just going to be a sort of painstaking process to figure out what should be in the book. But I would love to do that. I think part of it is, it's like I said about needing to be bored. I very rarely am. I would say I'm generally never bored. I don't have enough time to be bored. And so I think that having time for me is what really motivates me creatively. And I would love to just sit and not have anything to do so that I could work on this. But usually my weekends are pretty filled with catching up or getting outside and actually moving since I sit throughout the week. in front of a computer. So it's my priority to get outside and take pictures as opposed to sort of come back and reflect on the work that I've done.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, and then when you get when your kids are this age, their needs are right there in front of you.
Yes, absolutely. So I think it's probably something that will happen in the later years. I'll make the book about the early years, right?
Yeah, yeah. And a question here from Ofer Tenenbaum, who does have kids, one of the students who is a parent. He said, kids grow and leave the nest. What's next? And, that's interesting because, I mean, me as someone who has photographed family in the past and doesn't really do it now, and then looking at other photographers, we can think of Sally Mann and Emmett Gowan, who have made profound bodies of work of their family or of their kids. It has often been hard for them, at least for me, I think, like to do the next project. You know what I mean? Like shooting family is very like I had another photographer who shot family once say to me, like, oh, once you do that, you're never going to be as satisfied with any other like more documentary thing that you end up doing. Like you might like it, but it won't have the same connection. And I'm wondering, I mean, you're in the middle now, so I'm sure you're not thinking about what's next, really. You know what I mean? But I'm wondering if you could reflect on that idea at all.
Absolutely, yeah. So this project, I never really had any agenda with this project. This sort of life is the agenda, right? And I'm just following her around, watching her do her kid things and observing her and responding to her. So I'm definitely thinking of what will happen, when she's not around, or when she gets into this age. I mean, she's about to be a teenager, and I'm sure she's not going to want her mom following her around, taking pictures and posting them on Instagram much longer, right? So maybe not, but I'll definitely take pictures as long as she allows me to. But after that, I'm sure there will be something else. But it's definitely pertinent question, because I took I think I took a trip over to the East Coast when she was about 6 years old, and I took a 1-week workshop with David Allen Harvey, and it was so hard because I was disconnected from her, and here I was, and we had to do a project for a week, and I wasn't really sure what to focus on. And I was in New York, I was in Brooklyn, and it was probably the second time I've ever been there. And there's so many amazing things to see and respond to, but I felt sort of paralyzed. Like, what am I going to do here? I have no idea. And it felt like, it's almost like it's like a crutch in a way. You get used to being able to take pictures of a certain thing, and you have to sort of redefine what's meaningful to you. And it has to really personally mean something to you, I think, in order to pursue it as a project. So life will tell. I can't predict the future, but I'm sure there will be something that I'm drawn to that pulls me in. So.
Yeah. No, agree. Yeah, well, I think there is something when you're on that parenting channel. I mean, my kids are older now, so I don't really consider myself in that parenting channel right now. But there is that time. I remember I'd be so eager to like get away from them for a little bit, and then when I'd get away from them, I'd be like, "Well, what do I do now?" Like I was such a parent 24/7 that the idea of like me like be relaxing away or getting away from it, I wouldn't even know what to do. I didn't know what to do. So no, that's interesting. I do think these will make a great book.
Oh, thank you.
And it would be easy,
Well, I mainly want to make them a book because I have this paranoia with digital photography that somehow the drive will fail, or or something will happen and I won't have prints, and I never print my work now. So it's something where it's actually something I really intend, I want to do, just because it's like a form of a backup. And so having a book would be fabulous in terms of eliminating that or alleviating that paranoia. I'm gonna lose my work.
Well, we used to just have a negative, and you couldn't like, you just had one negative. There wasn't like backups, You know, but I know what you mean. Everyone has these fears of something disappearing, you know.
Yeah, it's funny because, Oakland, this area, there have been a lot of evacuations for fire, and you're supposed to pack your fire bag. And that's what I have in my fire bag is my drives. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's sort of what I would take with me. So,
Right.
so
Oh, these are beautiful.
So this is at Abbott's Lagoon. It's over in Point Reyes. And we often go there just for a walk or just to sit on the beach, read. She's not an avid reader. She doesn't love to read. So she generally entertains herself just doing things when we go out and about, either running around or burying her leg in the sand. And it was really interesting after I put these slides together. I actually I was looking back on Instagram and I realized that many years ago, I have a similar picture of her, and I realized I repeat a lot of the same themes over and over because we do the same things over and over. But she was also burying her leg in the sand way back then. And I think I mentioned to you, Timothy, what she said with this was, look, Mama, wouldn't it be strange if I didn't have a leg? And it's like, yeah, I was sort of blown away by sort of what the things that she's thinking as she's burying her leg in the sand. But I mean, that's probably just a normal, you bury your leg and it's gone, and how strange that would be. But she's been doing that since she was a little kid. So I was wondering, was she thinking the same thing in this picture, when she was 5, burying her legs in the sand way back then. But yeah, the light was actually very pretty here, but very bright and fairly uniform, bright sunlight. Situations are really good with the iPhone. Otherwise, you get this grainy dark picture.
That's beautiful, both of those.
So yeah, just other reflections. So this is in the Gothic Quarter in Spain, in Barcelona. And I just thought it was funny more than anything else. And then it sort of reminds me of that Harris Burdick book. But and then the right side was just at home with a mirror that she had received as a gift from her aunt.
Yeah, those are beautiful.
And then in terms of pairing, I think this one was very intentional, just the sense of going down and going up. What I liked about the one on the left with the light is not only just the silhouettes and sort of the rim light I was getting, but it's Treasure Island, and it's this sort of rainbow arc ladder, and it just really felt like she was going for a pot of gold, and so this is what really drew me to this scene with the strange light, flickering off of the ladder that she was on, and that sense that it was telling some sort of story. And then I think you had asked earlier again about suggestion in terms of how do you get someone in the right place. So on the left, this was just candid. On the right, it was also candid, but what happened, she was pretty tiny, and we're walking under the freeway overpass, and the lights coming down in between the roads above. And I really was responding to the light coming down, and I said, wow, look at that light, and that's sort of all the suggestion sometimes you need with a kid. And the kid looks and it's like, wow, light, oh, something to climb. And so she shoots up the side of this thing. And so this is like the sports photography where I can take a picture, but this is actually, the angle is quite steep going up. And she actually scaled quite a bit further, and I had to go and fetch her and bring her down because she wasn't sure how to get down. So took a quick picture, but then needed to go rescue her.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So these are, the one on the left is over again by the Young This was the first time she blew a bubble with gum. She was very proud of herself. And so this is one time when she actually wanted me to take a picture because she had accomplished something that was challenging. And then the right side was when she broke her arm. She actually fractured her elbow on the playground at the school that she's standing in here. It was a summer camp. And she's standing with a friend of hers who I think broke her arm 3 times. And when I saw them together like this with the you know, her and her cast and her friend sort of, I can't remember what her friend was doing. If she was just like, she knew I had a camera and she's like, nope, no pictures. And my daughter was sort of more willing to stand. And this was more of a post picture, not with the girl in the background, but with my daughter. She had come down one of those poles at school, you know, in the playgrounds where you slide down the pole. And so I'm watching, you know, she was pretty old at this time, but I'm watching and she moves fast. And I was thinking, no problem, you know, she's got the pole thing down. And she hit the ground running and she was having fun. And it was one of those squishy playground tiles. And one of the tiles was actually up at an angle. And so it wasn't the pole coming down from a really tall pole. It was just running across this squishy tile playground and she tripped and fell right on her elbow. So.
Man.
After the.
So you had said your background is, you had a background as a therapist, psychologist?
So I studied psychology at the university. Yeah.
Do you feel that informs any of this project?
Perhaps, I mean, maybe just from the emotional perspective, I was interested in cognitive psychology in school, and you know, I'm sure there's probably some impact. It was maybe more in the sense that I realized that it was therapeutic in terms of art being therapeutic for myself, just as I was hoping to work with kids, you know, doing art therapy and working with kids to sort through things through art.
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe the psychology also in the sense of the tension or the mystery, right? But I don't know.
Yeah, or sometimes they seem like, and I guess I was thinking of this with the picture on the right, like it almost seems like it could be an ink blot thing that you would show to someone and be like, what do you think when you see it? You know? Because it could go in so many different directions and you're like, well, is this optimistic? Is this frightening? Is this looking to the future, you know, positive way? Is this lamenting the past? What is this? You know, they have that sense of mystery to them, you know, that seems like everyone's going to answer a little bit differently.
Absolutely. That actually might be a more interesting conversation is, you know, what does the class, what are the stories the class sees in these and how are they perceiving them? Because I know them, you know, from the perspective I shot them, but I think that's one of the reasons why I don't like to entitle pictures. I don't want to tell what the story is. I'd rather say the place. And so because I like to leave it open-ended and let people interpret them their own way. So it's a little strange actually going through these and telling some of the stories behind them, just because that's part of my approach is I don't want to necessarily define that for you.
Right. No, that makes total sense.
So are there any questions or anything that
Oh, I'm holding back a bunch of questions that have come in. Why don't we dig into them here? There's a couple kind of career-oriented things here from Raul V, my student. He says, on your website, gwencoyne.com, it was mentioned that you are a creative strategy manager. What does that job entail? Does it relate to anything that we're seeing here? Like, does it relate to your photography at all? Like any of the skill set?
So as a creative, I lead a creative strategy team. And that's composed of actually a single strategist and myself. And I also manage the creative project management function at my work. And it's very removed from photography, I would say. We're really working with all of the different lines of business in our company to help sort of articulate their vision for their audiences, the messages and communications that they need to send out to their respective audiences. So we're like the we call it the voice of the customer, being our internal partners to the design team. So we help identify the audiences and the objectives, and work with designers and content writers and developers to bring these communications to life, and campaigns and websites and whatnot. So it's related to art. I feel like our work really sort of, in a way, what I think is most satisfying about my work is that it makes it so that the designers and the writers can actually do their work without having to, they can focus on the creative without having to focus on all of the stuff around that. And that's what I think I really lacked when I was a designer myself, is that I sort of had to be the jack of all trades. I had to do everything, the project management, I had to do the coding, I had to do so many things that just weren't creative and took me away and into that place of, stress and needing to work under pressure. So I feel really satisfied with my work because I'm basically enabling creatives to focus on creative work.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
great.
yeah, there was another part to that question, right? In terms of photography, how it relates. The only way it relates is we look at a lot of images while we're going through materials and producing assets for campaigns. So a lot of stock photography, sort of scouring through, which which mainly the designers are doing, but I love to do as well because I like to look at pictures. So.
Yeah. Oh, as simply as that.
Yeah.
Now here is a kind of functional part of that, and it says, what does it take to be a Getty image contributor?
Oh, so I'm so glad you asked. So I am a very low touch Getty image contributor. So I might just put that there. Back in the day, I used to post on Flickr, and Flickr had this, I guess it was, I don't know if it was a campaign, but basically Getty had an area on Flickr where they invited folks to submit their images to be considered for stock photography on their site. And I can't remember how many years ago that was, but I thought, oh, that's a great idea. So I would put images into the pool, and Getty reached out to me and said, yeah, we liked some of your pictures. Would you like to sign up with us and sell them? And so I thought, wow, this is great. This is exactly what I want to be doing. And so I signed up with Getty. And again, it's one of those things where I find I could be spending a lot of time on the weekend putting more images in, and I just don't. And I think it's something I really want to take time to do at some point in the future. So I think I have maybe, I don't know, 17, 16. I don't have very many images with
Right.
Getty. But it's just it's sort of the discipline for me of needing to go and submit and upload the model releases. And I guess I'm admittedly a little bit lazy about it. But that's how I got into it. It was really just through Flickr. Signing a contract, it was very easy.
That makes sense. And then there's a question about another project that you have. The question is, on your mini photo essay called Split Personality, there is a shadow that looks like a woman with a hat. What is it that you're trying to project with this image? And that's from Raoul V.
Oh, okay. So that was actually, Raoul, that was when I went to the workshop on the East Coast, and I had no child to follow around. And I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do with myself here? I have to come up with a project, and I don't know what to take pictures of. And So it was really the split of me sort of going out to New York without my daughter. It was a split from that perspective in terms of what was natural for my personality to be taking pictures of my daughter with her. And also that sense of wanting to be my own person, right? And wanting to do adult things and, focus on myself. And so it was really just sort of a personal exploration project. Has no background in schizophrenia or anything of that nature. It was just something that I did for fun as my project for that workshop for a week.
That makes sense. And then, and we will let you go soon. So then I'll just tell the students, if you have any other questions, put them in now, or we can just probably bring them up conversationally. Angie Hansberry has a great question here. She goes, what if your daughter became a photographer and wanted to use you as her subject? How would you feel?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we've been doing is actually, that was one of the ways I was trying to get her interested in photography, was I was saying, well, how about I take a picture of you and you take a picture of me? And she actually really enjoyed that for a while. And so we actually do have a few series of where she's taking pictures of me in sort of the same spots, and then we compare them. We did that on a few trips, but then she sort of lost interest in that. So if she wanted to do that at some point, I think it would be amazing. I would love that. I would love to see how she sort of interpreted things. She sees the world really differently than I do in pictures. And I actually invited her at one point to post on my Instagram account, because I wanted her to sort of select and curate and figure out what things she would like to post. And some of the things that she wanted to post were just completely different from what I would generally. So anyway, I like that sort of sense of collaboration. I would be all for it. Although I don't like to be on the other side of the camera. So I would probably be a lot like her in that I would encourage her to take candid pictures of me, but I might not pose for her.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. You're imagining how you'd even behave when you were being. I think we're good here. If there's anything you want to end on, oh my goodness, look at that.
I'll just flip through some of the color, because I think so just to show that as I've been taking pictures, I do bring the Fuji from time to time, and I find that the color is just much easier on an actual camera than it is on the iPhone. So I'll go through and so when I respond to color, or when I take pictures in color, it's really more about the color than it is maybe even about the light. But a lot of them feel a little bit like black and white because I like those rich blacks. When I focus in on them.
Oh, they do. They do.
So
wow.
That was that's pretty much all I have for you. So.
Wow, that is beautiful. This was wonderful. Thank you so much, Gwen.
Yeah, thank you so much.
This was fascinating. And to me, I mean, it's interesting to, the classes preceding your class, where I got to hear the students' reflections on your things, and then hearing what they were planning on asking you, and then seeing it all to come together. I think it's really such a, to me, it allowed me to understand your work better, not just through what you have to say, but through seeing how other students, with how it hits them as well. So this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Gwen. Let's have a hand of applause for Gwen.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
And so students oftentimes want to reach out and say hello, or send you a note. What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, you can reach me via message on Instagram. You can reach me on my email. I have it posted on my photography.gwencoyne.com website. So however you wish, I'd love to hear from you.